Welcome to Mind Beyond the Mission, a podcast for and by veterans and veteran family members. I'm one of your hosts, Brian McKenna, and I'm a strategic advisor at the Atlas Institute and a retired Canadian soldier.
And I'm Larissa Lamrock, strategic advisor at the Atlas Institute and a proud military family member. In this podcast, we'll be diving into real issues experienced by veterans, former RCMP members, and their families.
We won't promise you that we'll do everything perfectly, but we can assure you that we'll be getting real about the experiences that so many of us have in common, but don't always talk about, or don't necessarily know where or how to talk about it.
We hope you'll find solidarity in our words and experiences, and most importantly, that you'll find a sense of hope that things can truly get better. You can live present in the moment and live life authentically.
Let's get into it.
What is a TBI? A traumatic brain injury is a direct blow or jolt to the head, penetrating head injury, or exposure to external forces such as blast waves that disrupt the function of the brain. Not all blows to the head or exposure to external forces result in a TBI. The severity of TBI may range from mild, a brief change in mental status or consciousness, to severe, an extended period of unconsciousness or confusion after the injury. So that's a definition from the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center.
You know what it is for me is it's one of those things where something happens to you and your buddies look at you and go, "You good?" And then your response comes a little later like, "Yeah, totally, like good to go." That's where it is in some things. You know, maybe it's the thing that gets you into the hospital, and maybe it's just that thing that gets you a little confused for a moment. But we're going to be talking here about, you know, when that happens to you in a career, when that happens to you for years and years and years, and now you go to school, and now you don't know why you can't study, why you can't read, why when I went back, I had to read stuff 5-6 times just to put it in my head. So this morning, you know, I look back at the last year or so, and as I reached out to people in the community and I said, I need to know more about this. Who's the guy? And they all said, well, you got to phone Ryan Carey. Okay, so I phoned him. And we've been talking for about a year. And so here we are. We've got the man, Ryan Carey, in person. And so this might get a little weird. I mean, we'll do the Brian, and then we'll call each other the wrong thing a bunch of times, I'm sure. But we're here talking about TBI, and Ryan's going to introduce himself. I'll give him a little plug here. Obviously, he's here because he's a veteran and used to wear a jersey, one we might recognize. Why don't you start there?
Yeah, so I was pretty lucky to play football most of my, life. I played all through high school, played at university, Acadia University, and then was drafted and played in the CFL, played for Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. So dream come true and lots of head injury.
Yeah.
Lots of head contact up until, before joining the military. So that's, yeah.
Before we get into that, the single point, the rouge, you're out of the CFL now, so you can admit it's a weird rule.
Yeah, it makes the game unique, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, especially, when I speak to my friends down south, they're like, you guys have a football league? And then they look into it like, what the heck's that?
Yeah. They don't like, the Americans don't like things that are different, right? So for yourself,
you're not coming here because this is something you heard about. This is something that's happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've lived through personally, right? Through the struggles of post-Afghanistan. Looking back, obviously, back then there was no conversation on head injury at all. It was just, shake your head and get back in the game. And if you have a concussion, they had some protocols, like go sit in a dark room, but nowhere near. I would say the information almost doubles every year on what we know about the brain, and we're just learning more and more and more about the effects of head injury on the brain. And the important point here is that I think we do a good job with what people would think is a traumatic brain injury, where someone's knocked unconscious, where there's a brain bleed, where there's penetration of the skull. Like, okay, and then they're in the pipeline to do physiotherapy to help to get their brain functioning again. But what we're overlooking are these repeated blows to the head throughout a lifetime, whether it's sport, military. We're obviously gonna be talking about that, but I think that's something that's not on a lot of people's radar screen.
It's the first thing that put me down was pugil fighting. And for those that don't know what that is, yes, the Army still trains with bayonets. Some people will laugh at that, but it's the truth. Now, do we poke each other? No, we get the world's biggest Q-tip and we basically wallop each other with it.
Yeah.
And if you've got a really safety conscious outfit you're working with, well, then there might be padding and helmets. Right. Not always.
Well, right. And when I took the close quarter battle instructor course, what they did, which was brilliant actually, is all morning they would take us to the obstacle course and they would just drill us into the ground and we would do casualty work. So when we did our pugilistic fighting in the afternoon, we did it tired. We were really tired when we did it. So stuff like that's smart, but going off into a unit and just having the Friday afternoon beat each other up.
Oh, so yeah. So if I'm tracking, you're saying that you got tired, so you're not hitting each other with so much force.
That's right. You can't. Yeah. So it's a good way to do it. Now, there were still some pretty good shots in there. But we know this from football, that a football helmet doesn't protect your brain from that. It protects it from obviously getting penetrated by something, but it doesn't, stop the concussion, and a bigger helmet and more padding and, that doesn't work.
There I am. I'm on a armory floor and we're pugil fighting. And again, this Q-tip, I'm 5'11". It's like 5 feet. It's got red tape on one end, which is the butt.
Yeah.
And then it's got yellow tape on the other, which is the bayonet.
Yeah.
And I get out there, and there's a couple drills you're supposed to do. It's not just a wild melee, but it kind of is.
It can turn into that, yeah.
And I win my first round. I'm, chest out. Mm-hmm. I'm the man. Win the second one against a guy that's a lot bigger than me now. Like I'm king of the mountain, if you could insert some words in there on top of that. And I walked out on the third one, and I don't think that match was on for 4 seconds. I was on the ground. I was out. The ambulance was on the way.
Yeah.
I was staring up at people that I recognized, but I didn't know exactly who they were.
Yeah.
And I was released from hospital about a day and a half later. The next thing you know, I'm going down to the medic because we were about to start workup training. And I was given a clean bill of health, off to Bosnia. Years later, when I started asking about, hey, what's going on, headaches, neck pain, all this, the answer I actually got was, well, you got better. You got good enough to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
So how bad could it be? And I'm watching as I'm saying this, and Larissa's eyes are starting to realize, you guys do what to each, what are you beating each other up with Q-tips for?
And there's no pretest. I mean, they can't determine that. If there's no pretest that you do, and then, a cognitive test that you do, how can they say that you've gotten better or not gotten better? So these are types of things that we should be talking about. And I'll reference, I think pugilistic fighting is excellent. It's great for a lot of things. And it comes down to coaching. Do you have to hit in the head? No, you're teaching people to fight with a bayonet. I mean, I'm an instructor. I like, there's things besides hitting the head, because then people start focus on hitting the head. And it's like, and then it turns into that.
Would you rather us use bayonets?
Right. Well, I mean, when we were doing it, for instance, obviously you paired people up of a similar size. And, if a bayonet strikes, the chest in some type of lunge, well, okay, the fight stops, right? Because it's like, that's probably a kill shot or something. So there's ways of coaching that beyond just going there and it turns into a barroom brawl. Right?
So, Larissa, your eyes just got a little wide there about a minute ago as we're talking about beating each other up with Q-tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was curious a little bit, Ryan, about we touched on your career in the CFL, and you've just kind of skimmed around your military experience. So I think that's something that I just wanted to explore a little bit, because you mentioned lifetime of injury and head injury. So, I'm just curious about what came first, your experience in the military, just so folks, like I've just, you and I just had the chance to meet each other yesterday, but for folks to understand a little bit more about your experience. And then I do kind of have a question about those injuries and people either just saying, well, you're good now, or to shake it off. But if you can tell us.
So I mean, I think what happens, when I went through training, obviously was exposed to weapon signatures from the 84, from the 25 millimeter, and don't forget also us bouncing around in the back of light armored vehicles. We did pugilistic fighting in training as well. And then, that doesn't really stop. I mean, and it's actually worse for NCOs. I was an officer, so I get away from that, but still as an officer was exposed to all kinds of head injury. And we sometimes focus on, like, Brian and I were talking yesterday, we focus on the person that's firing the weapon, and anyone that's fired an 84 before will be like, yeah, we know it almost tears your head off. But don't forget, you've got a number 2 on the 84. You always have a number 2 with you. And then you have an ARSO, an assistant range safety officer. They're all getting it. Right. And so if you take someone that's been in the ranks, they've been a private, they've been a corporal, which they shoot way more because that's their job. That's, my job is deploy the weapon system. Their job is to shoot it. Then they become a corporal and they start training to become a master corporal, to become an ARSO in a range. And then as a master corporal, they're an ARSO in a range. As a sergeant, it's not until they're a warrant officer, but they've had all of this exposure. Not to mention, just think of all the other things. They could very well have been paratroopers. I mean, you don't land softly when you jump out of you come down like a lawn dart. How many of them are whacking their heads?
And your helmet keeps following you till it hits your head.
Right. There you go.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about that cumulative effect that can also be a traumatic brain injury. It's not necessarily just like that one specific incident or accident. So it sounds like the picture you're painting for me is that, pugilistic fighting, which is, over the course of a career as you're developing that skill and that training, but also all of these other things that are just drops in the bucket, another drop in the bucket, another drop in the bucket.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And then on top of that, maybe there is the fall out of the back of a vehicle or a blast injury.
Oh yeah. And don't forget, like a lot of the doors that are on these, they're heavy. Like I know of a girl who got hit by a door, like a metal door, like there's just, it's an environment where there's danger. And I think a lot of people too may listen to this and go, "Oh, we have to get rid of pugilistic fighting." And we get, no, it's not that. It's not that. It's letting commanders know and letting people in leadership know that, look we always talk about, there's a general said, how long does it take to train a warrant officer that's in the military for 20 years? And we're like, well, 20 years. Right. And so that's when you're going to start seeing these cumulative effects. And then what happens is they go in, they start, because it's easier now for people to come forward to start saying, hey, I think I'm having some problems here. I need to speak to somebody, but nobody's identifying the head injuries. And so now they started to get treated for PTSD and they get all these pharmaceuticals and nothing's working and they get frustrated and that can lead to all kinds of problems, because the side effects of anxiety and depression are similar, but the treatments are different. There's different treatment. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things you said I want to pick up on here. And I'm going with the most bare bones honesty. Shooting the 84 is fun, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay. So here's the thing. If someone were to approach a soldier and say, hey, do you want to go to a rifle range again? To most people that have never fired, they're like, well, okay, yeah, I get to go shoot. Yeah. For most soldiers, it's like, oh, I got to clean that gun again. Like, seriously?
Yeah, it becomes a job.
It actually becomes a bit of a pain in the butt over time, but that's not the same with these things. So you ever offer a soldier, you go, oh, you shot 2. There's more ammo. You want to put another couple down?
They will.
Absolutely. I'd do it now.
Yeah.
If you and I could slap on a uniform, we'd do rock, paper, scissors to see who was number 1 or 2, and we'd start shooting.
Yeah.
Every day we'd do that.
Yeah.
And
so that's why leadership's important, right? Because the troops are just going to be like, yeah, let's go do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen a soldier say, no, I don't want to do the coolest thing in the world.
And I just want to pile on there so I don't forget that we're talking combat arms specific because we're combat arms specific. But I mean, the Navy bouncing around in a ship, I've heard of Navy guys have told me getting strapped in and bouncing around in a ship because the ocean can toss a huge ship around. In the Air Force, the G-forces that the pilots are facing or the people on the ground that are around the rotor blades of choppers. So this isn't just a combat arms thing, Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the door, like we're not talking about the door on your kitchen cabinet. We're talking about a 240-pound door designed to keep out a blast that's trying to kill that tank or that carrier.
Right.
And when you don't do it right and that hatch comes down on your pumpkin, or what else has happened is people's seats have actually pushed them up into the metal.
Yes.
There's all kinds of ways this happened. I like the fact that you're admitting that a good army is still going to pugil fight tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's going to shoot its weapons. Yeah. It's not going to not do that.
Yeah. We've
got to do these things because if we don't, then we're sending people into circumstances where they're not trained, they're not ready.
Right. And let's take breaching. Do the breachers need to be right by the breach in training every single time it goes off? I don't have the expertise in that. I'll let the commanders decide that because I know when you breach, you want to get in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So it's talking. This is the conversations we need to start having.
When you're breaching, you're actually taking advantage of the concussion you just created,
Right.
and you want to be the next thing that happens to them.
Yeah.
They got concussed, and now you're in there on top of them, dominating the room.
Right. And the other side of that is commanders saying, well, this is how I got here. So they don't want to change that. And I get that. But you've also got instructors now that are, peeing blood because they're exposed to the blast as well. So it's like, again, what is the cost associated with training someone in the special forces that's doing that? It's not only a cost in training, but they have a special skill set. That's why they're there. And we want to be able to save that and give them a long career and give them a life after the military as well. It's not,
Can I ask, I'm going to shift gears a little bit because we've been talking about a number of mechanisms for people to sustain a traumatic brain injury. But can I ask you, Ryan, when did you first notice symptoms? When did you start to suspect? And we haven't had a chance to explore this kind of earlier. Like many veterans are diagnosed with other physical or mental health conditions before TBI is even considered.
Comorbidities.
Comorbidities. So, wondering when you first started noticing symptoms and what were they?
First of all, there was no education on it. So I didn't know until Tim Fleiser, who was the director, he played in the CFL for 10 years, and he's the director of the Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada, which is the umbrella organization for Project Enlist and the work that I'm doing right now with the military. And we met through a mutual coach, Sonny Wolf, coached me at Acadia. Sonny's from Montreal. They ran into each other, and he said, "Hey, Sonny, do you know somebody on the military side, because we're trying to branch into the Canadian military?" And he goes, "Yeah, I got someone for you, And so Tim and I met, and kind of his first question to me over lunch was, "Is what's going on in the military? Is there head injury?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, are you?" But obviously, someone from the outside doesn't know that. And in and around that time, and in the years before that, I started making myself the connection between these football players that I knew growing up and were my heroes, and getting diagnosed with CT, following that story and seeing the same behaviors and the same stuff happening with veterans. And I'm like, there's got to be a connection here. Where it really hit me was, and this was after the fact, but I was being treated for post-traumatic stress. Nobody looked at any of my head injury. This is a guy who's played professional football and been in the infantry. No one even asked the question, and just went immediately to, here's a bag full of medications. Now go talk to a psychologist. And I found that whole process, not only did the medication not work, it was frustrating because I was trying to express that it's not working, and the psychiatrist wasn't listening to me, to the point where the mother of my children had to step in and literally fire her because they just kept piling meds on and none of it was working. And that made me reject the system. It made me reject the Western medicine model. So that's the position I was in. And it wasn't until I started having that conversation and started really focusing on what would eventually become our Operation Brain Health, which I know we're going to talk about. When I really started focusing on that health, found a psychologist that I, resonated with, that basically said in the interview, if you're on a lot of medication, I can't treat you. Right. Cause it's, I need to get into your heart. I need to get into that space. And so this isn't me, Western medicine has been great for me, in a lot of ways. But I know where that disconnect was. And as soon as I started treating my mental health challenges physically, with physiotherapy, with exercise, with nutrition, with cognitive reserve, like using my brain, being social, when I started focusing on those things started to get a lot better. And at one point in time, I was able to get down to one pharmaceutical medication, which, okay, yeah, sure. I'm not knocking pharmaceutical medication. What I'm knocking is the lack of diagnosis, the lack of understanding of, wait a second, this isn't working. Maybe we need to look at something else.
So one of the things that, is in my background here, I remember when I came back from overseas, I was having a lot of problems. And, of course, into the doc you go and you start going through the process. And what I find shocking now is, 9 years after that was the first time someone started to look at my history from a physical damage point of view to my head. I'm baffled by that. I think we need to be at a place where we're almost making a little bit of an assumption here. You talked about the warrant officer. Takes 20 years to get there. Well, say you get there in 12, which is actually pretty quick. what have you accumulated over that time? And this is one of the things that happened to me was when I came back and I was having trouble. Of course, all the questions I went through were about what I just went through. Mm-hmm. So what happened to you in Afghanistan? And of course, I'm answering the questions.
Right.
Like, here's how it went. No one ever, even to this day, asked me, what was the cumulative effect of all the things that went bang and knocked you in the head from 1994 all the way up until this point. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we need to get to in some ways is like, yes, I want to push science. Absolutely. I want to lean forward and advance whatever the next thing is. But I really believe when we look at people and we try to figure out, if there was a catastrophic event, well, we're going to examine your head. No, let's get there. But I think we need to be in a place where we're looking at a 10-year career and we're assuming damage will have been accumulated. And that's kind of some of the stuff we've talked about. I mean, and I think from a football perspective, how many hard tackles did you take from elementary school, first time you played football, to the time you left? And you'd lose count.
Yeah.
That's what we need to be looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also since we're talking about veterans, so we'll talk about veterans that are struggling with their mental health, giving them things that they can do so that they are preparing themselves for their therapy, whatever that therapy may be. What's your 50% or your 25%, whatever. What are you going to be putting into that, that's going to help you recover from what you're dealing with? And then you can let the professionals sort out, okay, is this coming from head injuries? But the challenge is, like you just said, I mean, it's still not even on a lot of doctors' radar screen. So that's why the Concussion Legacy Foundation is developing education package for medical doctors to start bringing this issue to light and start saying, look at this.
And I think, we don't think we're acting in an arrogant point of view when we say we have something to educate doctors on.
Not at all.
I'm not going to teach them a thing about medicine, physiology.
Right.
That's them. But what I want to do is I want to give them the back picture. I want them to get a vision of who I am and what I've been through over the entirety of my career. And then they can look at it and go, well, okay, maybe we should start testing for this. Like, that's where I think.
Well, and there is, I mean, we are speaking with VAC, we are speaking with DND. Stuff's happening, stuff's moving in regards to this. It's moving slower than I want it, but I think that, it's going in the right direction anyways. But like you said, it is about education. I mean, these are really smart people, obviously, and they listen. Like when I started showing them videos of Afghanistan and videos and them watching someone shoot an 84, watching people beside the M777, watching a building getting demoed and seeing the blast wave come across and hit the troops that are standing in the trench. They're protected from the blast, but are they protected from that blast wave? And then they start going, oh wow, okay, we see where this is occurring. But then again, now that's the people that are in the space, that are in the head injury mental health space. And then you've got general practitioners out there that are trying to plug holes in the dam. The medical system is stressed right now, and it's triage. And how do you train doctors in this? Because they're busy, and this is all the stuff that we're trying to figure out. Yeah,
I think there's also some general understandings too, right? Like if you would take us back to the 90s, and some 25-year-old walks into a hospital, says I've been blown up in a war, you might think that he's making it up. Mm-hmm. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
They really have happened.
Yeah.
We have 20-year-old veterans in this country. We've got 23-year-old veterans on their second tour.
Yeah.
And that guy, to me, I mean, I think I'm looking at a teenager. That's a war veteran.
Yeah.
And that's almost going back to like a 1950s style of thinking. Well, now we start adding into that the whole brain discussion.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've mentioned, you certainly have as one of your main topics you're tackling, you call it Operation Brain Health. I would say, how do I make sure that the guy that sits down in that doctor's office is as ready to be helped as he can possibly be?
Right.
So let's go there.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the guy going through some therapy, I'm going through some treatment, I'm going to the doctor, what do you coach people to do to make sure they're as healthy to be helped as they possibly can?
Well, I mean, call it living a healthy lifestyle. But what does that mean? We broke it down into 4 pillars, just to simplify it, and that's exercise, nutrition, sleep, cognitive reserve. Most people, when you fix your exercise and your nutrition, your sleep gets better for obvious reasons. You fix your exercise and nutrition, your brain starts working better. What those pillars mean to everybody is something completely different. I'm not saying when I say exercise, I'm not saying you need to join a CrossFit gym or go be an Olympic lifter or be a bodybuilder. I'm saying it could be something as simple as walking every day. The importance of that, getting fresh air, and it might be as simple as that. If you can't exercise for whatever reason, then see a physiotherapist. But to say that, well, I can't exercise because I'm injured or I can't, no, you have to do some type of movement. You have to move your body. And we can go down the rabbit hole on each of those pillars. But, something like sleep, for instance, everybody knows sleep hygiene. Everybody knows you shouldn't be staring at the TV up into bed or watching the news or putting on, sorry for the term, war porn, like on your YouTube, like getting your central nervous system all ramped up to go to sleep doesn't make sense, right? So everybody knows what to do. You just got to do it. And cognitive reserve means, yes, it means training the brain. I like music for that, for a whole bunch of things. Cognitive reserve also means, besides the brain games and training your brains and maybe going to physiotherapy to do ocular work, it also means being social. It also means maybe doing some volunteer work. Now, you may need to get there, right? That might be a pillar that's a bridge too far for you right now, but the veteran themselves can exercise. There's no such thing as a drive-by fooding. You decide what goes in your mouth. So pick a nutrition plan, right? Like pick a nutrition plan and follow it and see if it works for you, right? Fix your sleep. We all know that, and if you're going to be popping all kinds of pills to fix your sleep, well, guess what? Eventually the pills stop working.
Tell me a little bit more about the cognitive reserve. Is it a way of kind of stimulating different parts of the brain? Like you talked about playing music and things, but tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, it's defined quite broadly, and again, it can mean different things. For me, I get a lot of the cognitive reserve piece out of music because when I'm playing the guitar, my left hand's doing something, my right hand's doing something different. I'm trying to sing kind of between the notes. Where's the pauses? I sometimes play harmonica. It also makes me social because I go out and I play with other musicians at open mics, and I promote musicians for music for vets, like any type of music for vets. I don't get stuck on the guitar. If a veteran wants to play the piano or they want to play the violin, it doesn't matter, right? Because so there's that. There's a way of taking something that is obviously good for your brain, but it's also tied to something. Because again, if you're going to isolate it, one of the most dangerous things is isolation. We know that. And so to isolate at home, and so say it's woodworking you want to get involved in, and then you just isolate in your shop and well, okay, sure. Part of that is that isolation. That's the practice part, I guess. But then you could turn that into, going out and doing that with veterans and something, and maybe in peer support. Have some type of a new mission, a new task, a new purpose in your life, and you can do that through the cognitive reserve pillar, right? And again, each of them can mean something a bit different. It doesn't need to be like, oh, this is what exactly cognitive reserve is. These are all easily looked up on the internet as well. But I can tell you from experience in peer support over the years, when someone's falling off, I always go right back to are you doing those 4 things on a daily basis?
I wonder if as we're going through this discussion, it's almost a little bit scary, right? You're the mom of a reservist. Mm-hmm. You got a young lad there that's embarking on what we're just describing is potentially injurious, right? Like,
well, and what happened before? A lot of people that join are athletes. They were athletes before. They played hockey or rugby or soccer. Soccer's a culprit that for head injury that people overlook all the time. But young kids heading that ball is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to talk about the motocross accident. Thanks for bringing it.
Yes.
Well, but this is part of the whole experience is that you've got this daunting task when you look at a career. I'm going to do all these things. And then what someone's telling me is like, okay, the best thing I can do is healthy living. Like, thanks. Like, yeah. But it is true.
Yeah.
And I've gone through other health concerns over the last couple of years. The same thing's true there. The best version of that patient sitting on that bed is what I want to deliver to the docs.
Yes.
And then, hey, guys, hands off, because I don't know what to do from here. Mm-hmm. But I do know how to do that part.
Yeah. And right now, if you're struggling, if the treatments that you're under, if they're not working, okay, that's okay. But turn the evaluation on yourself. Are you exercising? Are you watching what you eat? How's your sleep? What are you doing in the cognitive reserve space? Like, assess yourself on that. And then from there, and I've seen this happen so many times, that when veterans start focusing on those things, they use less medication. Whether it's cannabis, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whatever medication they're using, they start using less of it because they don't need as much. And, that also forces a conversation, because when you start focusing on yourself like that, we can start talking about within those 4 pillars, we can start talking about, hey, you need to have an encounter with yourself to heal these old wounds. It's going to be a lot easier to do that if you're physically prepared for that. One thing I do after my psychologist meeting each week, or every week when I see her, is I get up and I go for a walk. I got to move that energy, because sometimes they're heavy, but you got to find a way to go move it, get that energy moving. And that's best done through exercise. We hear it all the time. Exercise is the best antidepressant. It is. I can't tell you how many times I'm freaking out in my house, anxious or depressed, and I go out for this long walk and I come back and I'm like, what the heck what was I anxious about? Something as simple as a walk can change your whole day. It can literally change your whole day. Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned earlier, I want to pick up on, I certainly want to leave people with this in their mind, is we're not talking about you have to have 20 years in the infantry for this to happen to you. In fact, it might actually be someone in your family. A car accident can do this, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We were going up to the north, so I was actually flying up to Mazar-i Sharif, town up in the north. Well known as one of the hottest places in the world. I remember we clocked it in at 56 degrees in the shade.
Oh, very
once.
nice. Yeah.
And unpleasant. And some other day, I'll talk to you about what the porta potties were like. But we'll leave that one aside. But then we land up there. It's hot. But we landed in a place called Camp Marmol, runway like you'd find in Toronto, basically, with a little more dust on it. Then we went over to this place called Mamena. When we hit the ground, I thought we broke the plane. Yeah. Now, of course, I'm not an Air Force guy. I have no idea what kind of stress a hurt can take. But I thought we crashed.
Yeah.
No, it was just a hard landing.
Yeah.
And that experience sticks with me, because in some of the work I've been able to do at Atlas, I've been able to remind people, smashing into the ground for hard tactical landings, that can cause injury. You've mentioned the door slamming onto you. One of the things that one of the gentlemen that's helping us on one of our research projects has brought up, small boat teams in the Navy. Every time that craft, at whatever knots it's traveling, I'll go with fast.
Yeah.
They get a number, and I don't even know what a knot is.
Right.
But they're hitting those waves and just slamming, and it's coming up through their heels, up through their spine, and what's on top of that.
Right.
And so I really want people that are listening to this to realize, whoa, I didn't have to be in Afghanistan. It's not about shooting the 84. It's anything that can cause these injuries. So
we have soccer players that are demented in the UK that played in the World Cup that don't even remember the games. They've done tests for CTE on soccer players and found like stage 3, which is like equivalent to what the football players in the NFL. So start doing that self-assessment and say, yeah, no one's asked me about this. I played soccer all my life. People would, and then I joined the military. And I was in the Navy, or I was in the and then start thinking about, okay, well, I don't know what it's like to be. I wasn't in the Navy, but I know talking to people in the Navy, like, oh yeah, they identify with it right away, and they've got weapon systems that they're firing as well, Air Force as well. So you kind of start asking yourself that question. And I do want to offer that Project Enlist does offer a support line, so you can go, and it's basically a patient navigation system where people can go and they can sign up and they can get sent to wherever they live, a physiotherapist, get the proper assessments done and get the proper treatment if that's a course of action.
If there's a veteran or people that are around them, their family, their close personal friends, and they've got some questions and they want to know more about what where would you direct them?
So they can reach me through Project Enlist. .ca. They can go to the support line. Anyone can fill that out, whether it's a loved one or a caregiver. It doesn't matter. They can fill that information out. but I can be reached through projectenlist.ca. We're on Facebook as well, on Instagram. So,
and we're going to stay connected and create working together. Yeah. And so if they reached out to us at the Atlas Institute, we'd find a way to make that connection.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of where we're at is, we're at this place where science will push and we're going to help push it. But awareness, like that's where we need to be. And I really hope that when there's a vet out there and there's people that live with them and people that love them and there's running up against the wall, this treatment isn't working. I'm trying to get better, but I'm not getting better. That I hope that they can see this as something that, maybe we ought to look at that. And for those people out there that are medical practitioners, clinicians, what have you, I really hope that you can hear this and just start looking at this a little sooner. Mm-hmm. If we have no new science, but when a guy comes in front of you, when a woman comes in front of your table and says, I served in the Canadian Forces, I served in the RCMP, I would really like it to be a reflex that you start thinking about what's going on to that brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the veterans that are out there, peer support is so important. Get involved in peer support. It really does help. It really does help.
So, I did have the two last questions that I wanted to ask. And one of them was, maybe you just touched on it, what's one thing that you wish more veterans knew about TBI?
The physical treatment, what they can do themselves instead of, looking out and maybe like what they can actually do themselves on a daily basis to have their brain perform better. Mm. It's about getting the brain to perform better. So yes, we're talking about performance. But again, we're not talking about you competing against anybody else. You're competing against yourself, right? So, and wherever you are along those four pillars, that's okay. It's just keep doing it. Just keep trying to improve on that on a daily basis. Yeah.
And what's one thing that you wish more families knew about traumatic brain injury?
That's where the best information comes from. Like they need to be involved in this conversation equally, because someone who's suffering, potentially like a veteran suffering from a brain injury, may not be able to even figure this out. Like I've gone online with veterans and helped them fill out the form. Like they can't process the information. So it might be a caregiver doing that.
Right.
And then the caregiver starts going in and starts seeing the information and it probably starts to help them identify, oh yeah, okay, that's why he or she is acting or behaving in this manner. So everyone needs to be involved in this conversation. Not only let's call them the patient, but like everyone that's surrounding that. Yeah, right. For sure.
So I want to thank you for being here. You came down from Montreal, right, at our request, and this is expertise. There are a lot of forms of experts out there. But getting yourself ready to be helped is what you can do.
Yes.
And I really think, from the family perspective, because we're all in the brotherhood, if you will, I think I've got a better vision now of, hey, what might be going on with that guy that's disconnecting, the hermiting. Yeah. It's just another thing for me to start considering. And it's also another thing to give people hope, because when you're struggling, when you're trying to get better, man, there was a while that I was trying to just protect my job.
Yeah.
So I would say I was fine and everything's good to go. Yeah. But there was a period where I was really trying to get better. And then I'm retraining and I'm going through the voc rehab and it's not working. And man, that was when I was at a tough point in my life.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd have known then that, there were people on the file, that someone cares, that other people like sport and people that deal with accidents are also looking at it going, hey, what do the veterans have to say about this?
Yes.
That actually makes me feel a lot better to know that there's
we definitely, veterans in this country have a voice in this space. And the voice is the leadership that veterans bring to it. Athletes always respect that. And athletes and veterans are work very well together, because we think this is a crisis beyond veterans. It's a crisis with kids. Our kids should not be getting hit in the head below the age of 14, and maybe that it's going to push higher. But this ties into a bigger piece to the Canadian public health. It's not just for veterans. Yeah.
You can find Ryan at projectenlist.ca. Is that where they're
correct
able to get info? Yeah. And if they speak to us at the Atlas Institute, we'll certainly help out. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mind Beyond the Mission.
If this conversation resonated with you or helped you in any way, I encourage you to subscribe to Mind Beyond the Mission wherever you listen to your podcasts, so you'll be the first to know when our next episode comes out.
And if you know someone who might relate to what we've shared or could find it helpful, please feel free to send it their way. We're all on the same team.
Plus, we'd love to hear what other topics you'd be interested in us exploring in future episodes. Brian and I have a lot of ideas and subjects we plan to dive into, but you, the listener, have probably experienced or thought of topics that haven't crossed our minds yet.
Please reach out if this is the case. We're on social media at Atlas Veterans CA on most platforms, so please feel free to tweet at us, send us a message, or leave a review on this episode, and let us know what else you'd like to hear us talk about.
Brian, it's always a pleasure having these important conversations with you. Looking forward to next time.
You bet, Larissa. Take it easy.